Hello, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to a brand new episode of the podcast. This week, I wanted to invite Gemma Brunton on to the podcast. She is a portrait, brand, and boudoir photographer, and also happens to have the same name as me, which is very exciting. And I wanted to talk to her a little bit about how she's been finding COVID, the lockdowns, everything like that, and all this time that we've been living through, but also to see how what community efforts and things she's actually been able to get up to, should I say, as well. So I'm going to hand over to her now to explain briefly what she does and why she does it. And I hope you enjoy the interview, and I'll see you very, very soon.
Okay, well, I am Gemma Brunton. I am a photographer. And I've been working in and around Salisbury and the wider neck of the woods, including most of the south of England, really, for the last 11 years, working on mostly portraiture and boudoir photography and brand photography, which is a sort of more recent addition. Yes, I'm definitely branching out into more sort of commercial side of photography these days. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time, as always, and welcome to the podcast. As we briefly discussed just before the podcast went live, the podcast is mainly just a place for entrepreneurs, photographers, videographers, creative people to discuss where and explore why they do what they do, how they do what they do, and what they kind of got started with. So building off that, what made you want to become a photographer? Because some people were like, I always wanted to be a photographer, I always wanted to take photos for a living and do this, but others were like, no, I just did it because it was fun, and then people said they would pay for it, and then I made a career out of it. Right? So kind of do you see similarities in either of those examples, or are you semi-different?
I would say I would fall into both of those camps that you mentioned. In that, I did that whole I've always had a camera in my hand since I could walk kind of thing. So my dad was a keen amateur, and he always used to fluff around with a camera, taking family pictures and stuff. And I first got my first proper camera, one of those little Instamax things with the little square flash cubes that rotate, and you only get 4 flashes on a cube. And yeah, so I had one of those when I was about 7, and never looked back really. But I so properly cut my teeth on photography much later on, when I was a web developer, actually. So that was my first career. And I set up with my husband a web development company when I was fresh out of university, and we built e-commerce websites. And so the photography side of it came from sort of offering product photography and headshots and stuff for the websites that we were building. And once children came along, and I very quickly realized that doing tech support at midnight while trying to feed a baby was not a happy marriage of convenience for running a business and running a successful family life. I just decided to take a back seat from the web development and concentrate on the photography side, which is what I really like. I'm definitely a much more creative person than I am a techie person, and I always used to struggle with the whole coding side of things. And then I had babies to practice on. There's the willing subjects that couldn't move and they couldn't answer back and tell me no. So yeah, I used to photograph them a lot. And then from that, organically, it sort of built into a more of a formal thing, because I had the mummy network, all who wanted pictures of their babies too, and through schools and nurseries, and it just sort of grew from there. And it was 11 years ago that I took my first paid commission and never looked back really, and it's just sort of snowballed. It's been awesome.
Well, firstly, congratulations on 11 years, because not many businesses, a percentage of businesses can't say that. So congratulations on 11 years, firstly. And secondly, I think it's always interesting to explore kind of what their initial starting points are, as I say, for business owners, photographers, creative people, specifically. Back kind of when lockdown first was announced and COVID really was starting, nearly a year to the day, which is a bit... oh my god, it's been a year. Okay. Was that kind of, because I'm always interested to see, because everyone kind of reacted, even in the photography industry and the videography industry, they all reacted slightly differently. How did you kind of, I guess, react? Was there like an initial okay, we can't do this, did you like see a world where you could continue to work?
Well, in my sort of delicious naivety, I really thought COVID was only going to last a couple of weeks. I was thinking, yeah, this lockdown thing, we'll be back up and running by April, we'll be fine. And the weeks dragged on, didn't they? And it sort of began to sink in that perhaps we weren't going to be back at work in April. And this was a much longer story than I was trying to believe myself. And obviously, like most businesses like mine, it shut down overnight, and I had to cancel, postpone, refund those clients who were waiting for shoots. So that was hard. That's really hard. But I honestly did think I was only going to have to shift them back a few weeks. But like I say, the weeks rolled on, and they rolled on into months, and I figured I was getting bored by this point, and realizing that what I was doing on an everyday basis, work-wise, was not going to return anytime that soon. And yeah, it's very disheartening, having a fairly full calendar booked of shoots over the summer, which is traditionally my busiest period, suddenly going from that to an empty calendar of absolute nothing, and no end in sight for when I could possibly resume. And all my clients were incredibly understanding. Obviously, I was due to be photographing a wedding in Provence in June, and of course that didn't happen. That's hopefully happening again this June, but at this point it's still a bit up in the air. So anyway, yeah, I digress. But yeah, basically I went from a full calendar to an empty calendar literally overnight. And I thought, well, what else am I going to do? And I wasn't in the frame of mind to go, right, well, I need to actually, completely shift the focus of my business into something where I can earn money for this time. Because as I say, I didn't really think it was going to last that long, and that I'd be back to doing what I was doing before lockdown very quickly. So I wasn't in that frame of mind where I thought I had to use a very overtermed phrase, pivot. But I did want to do something useful. And that's where this charity project came in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that was going to be my next question. It was, how did you spend your time in lockdown? And the charity project itself, for those who may not have followed you since then, or maybe just hearing from you now, do you mind just briefly explaining, firstly, what was the project, how did you come across the project, and then what was the goal of the project as well, and then what skills or what things do you think did you take from it personally that you could then take forward into your more commercial based stuff as we move, hopefully, everything crossed, out of COVID in the next couple of months, into this new brave world that we all seem to be walking into and moving forward into.
Well, yes, it's the project is called Children of Salisbury: Life After Lockdown, and it was really born out of a understanding of what families were going through at the beginning of lockdown, and as lockdown developed as well. And despite the doom and gloom and the, in the press, and the obvious hardship and upheavals and challenges that everybody was facing, there were some really positive stories emerging of how these families were finding a way around these hurdles, and how they were dealing with the disruption to their lives and their routines, and how they were dealing with coping with boredom, and coping with the social isolation for the children, and how the children were not able to carry on their normal routines of schools and after school clubs and playing with friends and all that kind of stuff. And the positive stories were really lovely. Everything from, like we've heard a lot about, discovering walking in nature and getting puppies and learning to bake and all those good things, which are all really good, wholesome, simple pleasures in life, which I think we could all do with a bit more of, if I'm honest. There were those stories, but there were also other really poignant stories of children separated from their parents who were off working on the front line and completing amazing charity challenges to help to try and help support both provide charity support, but also emotional support to those parents that weren't there. Children overcoming anxieties by learning how to meditate. Very special family bonds that were broken during lockdown because they weren't able to see each other. And then when lockdown was lifted and they were able to reunite with their grandfather, their granny, or whoever it was they'd been separated from, and those really poignant reunions and that was a real positive because, you know, these are stories of how children have adapted and learned new habits and learnt what was really important to them. So, you know, by being separated from their granny for 3 months, it really hammered home to them how special that bond with their granny was. So, and the ongoing sort of lessons for them won't be forgotten as lockdown eventually becomes a distant memory. You know, they will have instilled new habits, new skills, new challenges, new bonds. And that was really what I wanted to explore photographically. And I wanted to do something positive because there was so much negativity around. And I really wanted to try and harness some good feeling out of this rubbish time. And so yes, it really sort of was born out of that desire, really. And I wanted to do something for the good of the community, but also to use my skill as well. And so obviously, I didn't want to hang up my cameras for too long. So as soon as we were able to get out photographing again, I had many families already lined up, and the idea was that they contributed to two local two charities that we were raising money for. One was the Stars Appeal, and the other was for Action for Children. They contributed to those two charities, and then the deal was that I went and photographed them and captured the story of whatever positive elements of lockdown they were finding. And at the end of the year, and 112 children later, and £5,000 raised for charity, we collated all these portraits into a limited edition book, which is really special. It's the first time I've ever published a book. It was quite a learning curve for me, and it was amazing. And there's a copy on its way right now to the Duchess of Cambridge, because she's a patron of Action for Children. And then there's also a copy of the book going to the Earl of Pembroke, because he's the president of the Stars Appeal, and one also going to the Bishop of Salisbury. So it was a really nice way of kind of culminating the whole project into a body of work in the form of a book. But yeah, it was a really cool time, and I loved it. And it was easily the hardest 6 months of my life, but I absolutely loved every second of it. It was just really nice to do something positive out of a really rubbish time.
Well, firstly, congratulations on raising such a mountain of money, for a great cause. But also, was it kind of, was the expectations of what you would do with the project specifically what actually ended up happening, or did it grow beyond? Would you say it grew beyond you?
I knew from the outset that I wanted to produce a book, because, as much as each individual portrait and the story behind that portrait is enough in itself, by putting together all these portraits into one place, I think what's the phrase? The sum becomes more the body of the... Oh my God. Whatever it is.
Yeah.
As a body of work, it's more meaningful as a collection of portraits rather than just an individual portrait. And I wanted this sort of powerful umbrella story to be together in a book, because we're sort of chronicling a slice of social history here, and I want this book to be looked back on in decades to come, and for whoever's looking at that book to get a really well-rounded idea of what it was like for children, in spite of all the upheavals and things. Is that they, for a proportion of children, I'm not saying all of them, but for a proportion of children, actually found real positives from the whole experience. That was my goal anyway. There's some sort of tentative talk about there being an exhibition, which would be amazing. I don't know whether that will come off or not. But yeah, in answer to your question, yes, it did sort of culminate in what I expected in the end. But it has snowballed a bit, and it's picked up some media attention, and I've got a couple of awards nominations, which is awesome and completely unexpected. And yes, so it has kind of taken on a bit of a life of its own, which is fantastic. And I'm super grateful to all the families for taking part, because without them it would have been nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. No, absolutely, completely agree. And I think for me it just shows the inherent will of some people in testing times are in times when you're not meant to necessarily, it's very dark times, very negative times, such as you mentioned already, about, finding a positive or finding a positive element or a positive spin or a positive thing to do and spend that time. So I guess the question will come from that afterwards of, you've done this mammoth project. What's next for you and your business, and what's your, goals or your expectations or your wants for, maybe not necessarily quarter two, but as we move into the summer, and as we've said previously, cross fingers that the majority of the worst of COVID is behind us now. Of course, no one knows that, but I think it's interesting to explore what your goals would be, or what your where your wants or your desires are from a business standpoint, not necessarily always revenue based, but is there a specific project, a specific kind of thing, something that you're developing, something that you have got an idea for, maybe like a lockdown ago, or a couple of months ago, or etc., that you've now actually turned into a viable service or viable option for your clients?
Well, you will know, Carlton, from previous chats we've had, that I'm quite happy to hold my hand up and say I am a rubbish business person. So the whole business side of it and the revenue side of it and the quarter two, quarter three, quarter four plans, that's all just a bit of a mystery to me, frankly. I'm quite happy to admit I'm in it for the creativity and the passion rather than the money. However, I'm completely aware that bills need to be paid, so I do have to keep half an eye on that. So having made that disclaimer, I have focused on a non-revenue earning project, surprisingly. I loved the creativity of last year's project because it really allowed me to step away from focusing on the income and really flex my creative muscles, because I was really running the show with this project. And yes, I worked with families on finding individual stories and unique aspects to what the children were getting up to, but ultimately creatively that was my baby. So I really want to capitalize on how amazing that feeling was, being creatively in control and doing something that really spoke to my passions rather than always working just for the client, which is obviously what I normally do. And I've come to that realization now that it's incredibly important to, whilst have your bread and butter money earning projects, is also to creatively indulge yourself, because I think you can very quickly use up all your battery juice just getting the work in to pay the bills and not firing up your creative batteries. And so with that in mind, I've already tentatively embarked on this new project, which is called Mothers and Daughters. I am the mother of a teenage daughter. We have a hilarious relationship, and sort of reflecting on that, what I really want to do is to explore the mother-daughter relationships really through from birth right through to grandparenthood, and how those unique dynamics between mothers and daughters can show themselves. And so it's really, really just a fledgling idea at the moment. It's just a sort of a little seed of an idea in my brain. But I've already got lots of mums and daughters interested and signed up, ready to go, as and when I kind of crystallize what it is exactly I want to do, and obviously when lockdown can lift. So that's going to charge my creative batteries this year. But as I say, it's not a money earner. It's literally for indulging my own creative passions, which
I completely agree is very, very important to do. And that's why, a lot of people say to me, why are you fired up all the time? Why are you this? Why are you that? That's why I do a lot of the YouTube projects I do. That's why I do some of the personal projects I do. That's why I do some of the, just off my own back, Salisbury promotional videos, for example, or, a more bigger creative project that I may or may not be getting paid for, right? Some of them align, which is great. It's wonderful, when you can have a project that is creatively really challenging for you, and also you're getting paid. It's like, I would have done this for free, but I'm getting paid. Great.
I don't have to often though, do they? Sadly.
No, they're not. No. And especially now is probably I'm not expecting any. But if they happen, they happen. They're great when they do that way. But I think it's very important. I really, and that's why I wanted to jump in, because it's really important for anyone who's listening to this to have those creative elements, to have those creative projects, to have those other things that aren't just work, right? Because there's this concept of when you work for yourself or when you do what we do, whether it's creative, photos, video, whatever it is, you get to a point where you get to a rhythm where you'll grow to hate, it's not the right word, but dislike it or despise it, because it becomes this, and I don't know whether you found this, where it becomes this like inherent, there's a money figure attached to everything you do, and it devalues the work and effort and time and blood, sweat and tears you put into building the business or the project or etc. And it I don't know the best way to describe it, but it's this kind of, you get de-incentivized to it because it's just a project. It's just worth whatever it's worth, right? Whether that's £2,000, 200 quid, or somewhere in the middle, doesn't actually matter. It's still just, it's just for that amount. Have you found the same?
I like to describe it as literally just lose my mojo. No, don't get me wrong. I adore what I do, and I adore meeting families and getting to know the kids and chasing them around with a camera and having an awesome time, and the others, other aspects of my photography as well, the boudoir and the brand stuff as well. But when you are purely working to pay the bills and not working to creatively inspire yourself, I really, really find myself just kind of going down into the doldrums a bit, because dare I say it, and I hope none of my clients are listening, but it can get a bit formulaic, and creatively, actually, that's the last thing I want to do. I don't want to create identikit, cookie cutter portraits for my families. That's the last thing I want to do. So I always try and do something that's unique to them, something that only they will have in a location that only they will be photographed in. I don't use the same locations twice. That kind of idea. So, but harking back to what I was saying, you do eventually start to just sort of dry up with creative ideas, and you just start to get a bit slow and uninspired. So it's become very apparent to me off the back of how much I loved last year that having something purely for me is really important to then go on and benefit my clients, because I will do a better job for my clients if I'm also doing something for me too. So that's been a real awareness booster for me.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I completely agree. And I think it's one of those things that a lot of people, when they especially get started in business or they get started in whatever it is that they're doing, they get this concept of, right, I've made a decision, I'm in business, I need to make money, right? Yes, don't get me wrong, there is times where you need to make money, and there's times where you're like, I need to make money, I'm very stressed about money, oh my god, money. Right, yes, there is, right? Yes, that's every business owner happens, that happens, right? But also there needs to be periods of time where you take a step back and go, right, okay, this is what I've achieved, great, let's celebrate that. Let's give myself some time to get better at my craft, which is basically what we're describing here, right? Which is this concept of like having a creative boundary or pushing your creative boundary specifically. So you have a certain yardstick, right? And you would normally, however much you would put price on that, there isn't going to be a client in the world who's willing to pay what you see as that as valuable. Hence why you do it as a personal project, because then you can see what you are capable of, right? Because for me, for example, if I think shots like worth trying, for example, I have no idea if it's going to work, but I'll try it on a personal project first, and if it works, I'll then put it into a client project or suggest we do it in a client project. But I wouldn't.
Yeah.
And you're never going to know. You're never going to know until you make that step forward and say, okay, well, let's try this, right? Or let's see if that works. Let's see if this kind of thing works. Let's see what happens if I put the light here, or etc. What if we have them pose this way? Actually, I like that. Maybe okay, why, etc. And I think for me, it's one of those things that some people can't be. They're not as confident in doing, because it kind of I don't know whether you found this, but there's this kind of inherent, I guess, want or inherent understanding that whenever you're a media professional, you know everything that you're doing with media. You need to know everything. You know every pose. You know every lighting technique. You know every camera. You know every lens. You know everything there is to know about media. No one actually tells you, right, who works in media, that media moves. Right? All of the things that you think you know now are great now. But tomorrow, people who are in your industry have pushed the boundary forward again right? And they're pushing the boundary forward the next day, and the next day, and the next day, and the next. So if you're stood still, you'll be left behind because everyone else is trying to push what's possible. So, and I think the question I guess there would be, because it can be very overwhelming, right? Getting into media, becoming a photographer, becoming a videographer, becoming a digital marketer, whatever it is that you want to do, right? Or whatever it is you do, what advice would you give to someone? Because I know a lot of my viewership, or a lot of my audience, or a lot of people who listen to the podcast are people who are starting business owners. Who they are, they're not even a year in, maybe 2 years in, right? They're very, very new in regards to them actually understanding business, wanting to business. They're like, yes, I have passion for photography, but I actually want to make money from it. I want to do it for a living, right? So what advice from your experience would you give to people who either haven't made the decision to actually, yes, I'm going to charge for photography because I'm good enough yet, or I feel like, or perceived I'm good enough yet, or that are starting to? What advice would you give to those people who are, questioning it and are, I guess, stressed about it, concerned about it? Like, as we're coming out of lockdown, they're like, I want to make this work because I'm worried I'm going to get made redundant tomorrow.
Okay, well, back when I first started out, I distinctly remember a talk I attended from quite a well-known photographer who said, and I can only speak for photography, right? Because I'm not a videographer, but I imagine it's the same kind of scenario. He said basically, you get two types of photographer. You get a photographer who is awesome, but who is rubbish in business. And then you get a photographer who is a great business person, but actually a rubbish photographer. Or did I say that? I said the same thing twice, didn't I? Basically, you either get a photographer who's an awesome photographer, but a rubbish business person, or an amazing business person, but a rubbish photographer. Right? You don't want to be on either of those extremes, right? You want to be somewhere in the middle. So if you put all your eggs in one basket and say, well, I've got to make money, there's going to be some sacrifices because chances are you're not as brilliant a photographer as you are as a business person, right? But equally, if you go the other way and say, I'm an amazing photographer, and you should have some kind of understanding about where you sit on how good you are.
I am the best, Gemma. I am the best photographer ever. Right. No one can even come close to me. No one has ever said ever. Right. But carry on.
But if you are this outstanding photographer, but you don't have a single clue about business, guess what? You're never going to pay the bills. So you do have to understand whereabouts on that spectrum you are and fill in the gaps. If you do want this to be a full-time job for yourself, and you do want to earn a living and also produce amazing creative work, you have to take a good hard look at where your skills are, and obviously maximize where your skills are good and work really hard to maximize where your skills are bad. And hopefully, eventually, with some learning and some time and some mess ups along the way and some regrets and going, oh, I should have done it this way, or next time I'm going to do it that way, you will learn how to achieve that balance. And it is a constant learning curve, let me tell you. 11 years down the line, I totally don't have it right. I'm a shit business person, pardon my language. I still can't do it, but I understand where it is I need to be. It's just getting to that point, right? So my advice to anybody starting out would be, work out where you are on that spectrum and fill in the gaps accordingly. And don't be afraid to be creative and not so money-minded, or vice versa, but just be aware of where you are. And the second thing I would say is, and it's a really easy thing to say and much harder to do, I appreciate, but don't undervalue yourself. Too many aspiring full-time professional photographers or videographers or whatever will give their time away for nothing in the early days, or next to nothing, 50 quid for a photo shoot or whatever, which is fine, and to a point. And I understand why people do it. Hell, I was there, I did it too. But you are not doing yourselves any favors in the process, because those people who take advantage of your skills for next to no money won't value the product that you are giving them, because they haven't paid very much for it.
Because it's wasn't throwaway
money. Yeah, right? It's easy come.
It's if it's crap, then it doesn't really matter because I've spent nothing.
And it doesn't matter whether you've produced an amazing piece of art for this person, this client, or whether you've produced something mediocre. They won't value it because they haven't paid for it. Now, that's not to say that you should go and charge thousands of pounds and produce a mediocre product, right? Again, it's that question of balance. But at the same time, don't put your heart and soul into producing a piece of work that you are being paid nothing for. You are not pleasing yourself. You're not pleasing the client. And also, crucially, that client will then go around to everybody and say, look at this amazing piece of work that I paid next to nothing for. You should go and do it too. And so you end up with a bunch of clients who love your work, or, you know, you're kind of a bit ambivalent about your work because they don't really care because they're not going to pay you much money for it anyway. So charge a fair price, but don't undercharge yourself, because you're not doing yourselves any favor in the short term or the long term. Because when that client comes back later on, a few years later, and says, hey, you know that 50 quid photo shoot you did for me a few years ago? Guess what? I want another one. And hopefully in a few years' time, that, you know, as time's gone on, you've realized that you can't sustain a business on 50 quid. So you've upped your prices to something much more feasible. And that client comes back to you and goes, well, hang on a minute, why aren't you charging 50 quid anymore? And you, the photographer, videographer, whatever, are going, well, because I come on, I earn more money going and work at McDonald's. Well, guess what? They don't want to pay more than the 50 quid anymore. So you've lost that client. So it's a complete false economy. So
it is difficult, right? And the one thing I would jump in and say here is costing money and how much should you charge is a hot topic in our industry, right? It's like, how should we target? How should we quote? How should we do this? How do we do that? It's all subjective, right? There's something you need to understand, right? I'm just talking from my experience here. It's subjective, right? I've had some clients who I go quote a job, they go, wow, that's expensive. The same amount of money has been talked about. I have another client a week later go, wow, that's really cheap, right? So, and we're talking the same price here, right? So which one is it? It's either really expensive or it's really cheap. The reality of the fact is it's subjective. It's the difference is, do they understand the value in which you provide, right? Is there a big difference between hiring Gemma, hiring me, or hiring someone else? Yes, there is. You get our expertise, you get our equipment, you get our insurance, you get our creative brain, which is actually what you're paying for, right? To be honest with you, anyone can show up with a camera and point it at the right thing and go talk to it. Or, in your case, smile, right? Anyone can do that. But what everyone can do is know how to direct, know how to someone feel comfortable, know how to, for them to get the right piece of content, whether that's an image or whether that's video or both, right? That's the hard bit. That's the bit that takes time and energy and effort to actually create and craft and to help your client feel comfortable, right? Feel comfortable in front of a lens. Because I don't know whether you found this, Gemma, but a lot of my clients go, I don't do video because it's terrifying. The idea of being in front of a camera and talking to it is terrifying. And yes, that's very normal. That happens a lot. You know, and people see what I do and, you know, talking stories. And you said this yourself in our first conversation. How do you talk to your stories so candidly and so easily? And I was like, well, okay, firstly, I've been talking in this context for nearly a decade, number one. Number two, you do it a lot, you get comfortable with it. It's just become second nature to you, right? In the same year where you do anything. So, you know, whenever I say, to anyone, how do you get started on video? Well, the first step is always the hardest. So make the first step, right? And there is a lot of people who are going to help you, right? There's a lot of people who are out there to help you and suggest, and they're not necessarily looking for a payment method from that. They're just going to go, because the thing is, like, people ask me, why do you give advice for free? Why do you do this? Why do you do that? Because what it does, it's once you understand what's valuable, or the client or the perceived client understands what's valuable, they're more likely to pay someone to do it for them and do it professionally. Because if there's a higher demand for photos or video or media or whatever, then everyone wins. Me and Gemma both win. Everyone wins. Everyone in our trade wins. So, you know, when people say, oh, are you concerned that there's a competition? Or, you know, and that's going to be my next question to you, Gemma, as well. It's going to be, how do you deal with competition? But, you know, for me, I don't see anyone as competition. Because if they're saying, this is why you should do video, this is how good video is, this is why you should be on video, etc., they are helping me run up more money. and run up more potential projects and more potential clients and more potential revenue streams. Because the more people who understand why video, content, audio, images, etc. is valuable to their business, the more money every person who offers that service will make.
Exactly. We've all
right?
got to buoy each other up, and somebody undercutting by charging next to nothing is not doing the industry any favors in the whole, are they? And yeah, so educating your client as to what is important and what they're buying into is paramount. Educating them as to the value of the product that you are providing for them, and educating them as to why you're charging why you're charging what you're charging. I'm not saying you need to go and justify your prices and say, well, I spend 5 minutes doing that and 10 minutes doing that. Just saying they need to understand what goes into crafting this piece of creativity, whether it's video, photo, art, whatever. Actually, what's involved in that. So that is, it's super, super important. And, sadly, most of our clients have no idea really what they're buying. They just like what they see, or they have an end goal in sight, just, oh, I need a family portrait, whatever it is. So if we educate them as to, what's a good family portrait? What should they be looking out for? What should they keep an eye open for? What are they going to want in years to come? But all these kind of things that they probably haven't even thought about. They just know what they want. They just don't know how to get it and in what format they want it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the same in business. Like, in most cases, people who come to me and asking for video, I ask them, why do you want video? That's the first question I ask them. Why do you want video? Because my marketing person said I should be doing video. Okay, but why? What's the reason? What are you creating video about? Because creating video is actually a lot more broad than people think, right? Video, you can do anything with video, right? You can do anything at all you want, but I need to know specifically what we're doing, so then I can help educate you on how to go about doing that. And, in most cases, when I bring on a new client, a lot of the initial conversation is, okay, this is what it actually looks like, and this is where the costs are, and this is what it looks, this is the amount of hours we're talking about, and this is how long, and so on and so on and so on. And I'm educating that client on, this is what video production looks like, right? Or this is what digital marketing looks like, or this is what consulting looks like, or this is what podcasting looks like, right? These are the things to be expected from those things, right? So, and there's nothing wrong, and I don't want the whole podcast to become why you shouldn't charge £50, right? There's nothing wrong at the start charging £50 in the concept of doing that, right? Because everyone does it, everyone's done it for free, everyone's charged cheap, and so on. And the reality of the fact is, as your demand goes up, your time doesn't become more. I wish it did. It would make my life a lot easier, but it doesn't. So through simple economics, your price has to rise, because you have to cut away some demand somehow, right? And yes, you are unfortunately going to lose some clients in the process of growing your business, but what you're going to do is you're going to pick up people at the other end, right? So as you move forward, people who aren't willing to pay 50 quid, you'll pick up people who are willing to pay whatever it is that your next bracket is, right? So whether it's 500 quid, grand, 2 grand, whatever, whatever it may be, or somewhere in between, right? Again, it's all that subjective number game, right? The reason why you should charge 50 quid is very simple. Do you have a level of demand yet? Or are you still trying to learn? Whether it's you're trying to learn in regards to photography, or you're trying to learn in regards to how you go about running a photography business. I use photography as an example because it's very similar with videography, but it's just different medium. Are you still learning that process? Are you still new to business, right? Then you shouldn't necessarily, because the thing is that, and people that I don't think a lot of people talk about, the more money that's on the line, the more perceived stress is on the line as well for everyone involved, right? Till you get to a certain point, I've found, which is really weird, right? I don't know whether you found this, but you get to a certain level where there's lots of stress, and then it gets to a point where you're working with a company who's just like, yeah, we'll spend 5 grand, 10 grand, whatever it is. We're concerned about the product, we're concerned about the whatever it may be, but we're less stressed about it. Does that make sense? Like, there's not a level of, I need this to work because I've saved for however long to make sure I can pay you. Have you seen a similar trend or a similar thing?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. It's there's less risk factor for everybody involved, with where there's less money involved, which I understand. And I've been there. I've done that 50 quid thing, and I totally appreciate how difficult it is to say don't charge 50 quid, even when you're brand new in business. But
because that 50 quid to some starting photographers is like, oh my god, this actually makes
somebody wants to pay me £50, and you suddenly think you're on a winning streak, and it's exciting. Somebody wants to pay you for doing something that you love, and it's awesome.
And that you would do for free, right? That's generally obvious. Like most people would do that for free, right? Because they do it they do it as a hobby, they do it for fun, so they would do it for free. And you want to pay me to do that?
But if you are at the point where you are unsure of your skill and unsure as to whether this is a viable business, and unsure about so many things, and unsure about whether you can provide the product that the client is going to pay you 50 quid for, if you're unsure of any of those things, it's a tough one. It's kind of chicken and egg, isn't it? I totally get it, and I'm not sure that there is a right answer. I think you have to do what works for you. But certainly in terms of pricing in general, I think you have to work out what it is you want to earn and work backwards from there. If you have an hourly rate in mind, you have to work backwards in order to understand what it is you need to charge in order to get that hourly rate. And yes, that will be difficult initially. It will be difficult. A lot of people transition into full-time photography from another career, and they will go part-time in their previous career for a while until they can get established, and with their photography, this is get established to a point where they can start charging more feasible rates. And that too is fine. But, especially if you've got rent and mortgages and stuff to pay, you need to have a balanced and predictable income, which photography is neither of those things.
Just to be clear, running your own business.
Your own business.
Just to be clear, if you run your own business, you don't know the idea of a steady paycheck. It doesn't happen.
No. So it's completely understandable that people will want to take any money that they can get in the early days, but it's just not a long-term solution. And I still don't have my pricing sorted in a format that I'm happy with. It's something that should and is in a constant state of flux, because your circumstances, your requirements, your costs, your suppliers' costs, all of those things are always changing. So it's something that you need to constantly be looking at and reassessing. And don't be afraid to up your prices. If you think, oh God, I've just started charging 50 quid, I'm going to have to charge 50 quid forevermore because otherwise I'm going to lose all my clients. Yes, you will have some natural drop.
You will lose a percentage, unfortunately, but you're going to lose a percentage whether you charge 50 quid,
exactly,
100 quid, or 1,500 quid. It doesn't matter. Guess what?
The clients who stay with you are not staying with you because of the price. They're staying with you because they value your work and they value what you do. So, and actually yes, the price has something to do with it, but the price tag is much, much less important if you have the right client who values what you do, because they will buy your service. They are buying you. Then they're not buying 50 quid's worth of photography. They're buying.
They're buying into you, and they're investing in you.
Exactly.
And it's that age-old, like, you need to invest in yourself before you can ask anyone else.
Quite right. And guess what? There will people who will look at you charging 50 quid and go, I'm not buying that. That's way too cheap. And they will only come to you for work when you charge higher rates, because there's something reassuring in there being a higher price tag. It's like Stella Artois, reassuringly expensive.
Yeah, I think it's also that, like, taking yourself seriously thing as well, right? Yeah. Like, if you cost a specific price, right, you take yourself serious enough to be worth that cost, whatever that whatever that cost is. The reason why we're not using numbers here is not because we want to leak our own numbers, it's because the numbers don't matter. The numbers are subjective, and the numbers, by the time we release this, might have changed, right, as well. So that's why I don't like going into numbers, because numbers change every 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, a year, 6 months, 2 weeks.
And my numbers will be completely different to your numbers, or any other photographer's numbers in the industry. What works for me is not necessarily going to be what works for them. So I think it's very important not to try and compare too closely to what your competition is doing.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Completely. Yeah. Cool. So I think that for me, I mean, I'm aware of time, so I want to wrap up soon, but I like to give the guests an opportunity to ask me or throw in a topic specifically to discuss a little bit. So do you have anything that, maybe a question for me perhaps, or a topic of discussion that we could explore for the next couple of minutes, just to kind of end off the podcast specifically, because that was kind of everything I wanted to discuss briefly. In regards to what. So, do you have is there like a topic or a question? There may not be, right? It's just a open forum.
Well, I spent the good earliest part of this podcast talking about recharging my creative batteries and getting all that going. And I would love to hear how you and other people out there who are listening, how they value their creative time and their personal projects and what they like to get involved in, because I've not done a lot of this personal project stuff before, which is crazy. In over a decade of being a photographer, I've not really indulged myself in that. So and having become very aware of how important and valuable it is, I want to hear from other people who are getting involved in that kind of stuff and doing it on their own time, but still running a business at the same time. So yeah, hit me up. Tell me what you're all up to. What about you, Carlton? Have you got anything in the pipeline?
I mean, for me, it's interesting because I have like quite a few personal projects, things that technically don't earn me any money, but are very valuable to do. We're currently talking on one at the moment. But for me, it's one of those things where I have so many ideas, and I'm sure you have so many ideas, right? Every business owner, every creative person you'll talk to has 1,000,000,001 ideas. The thing is that the 1% of the ideas actually become reality, and that's a good metric, to be honest, for most business owners, because the majority, it's always a balance between, as we've discussed before, bringing in paid work that pays the bills and brings in income, and also then being creatively fulfilled in what you do, right? But I think for me, like, what is a creative project? I mean, for me, it's anything which I would like, my vlog, for example, it's a creative project, it's a creative outlet for me. This podcast is a creative outlet for me. Is there business orientations or business reasons for doing it as well? Yes, of course there is, right? In the same way, doing a creative project in any form has a creative and a business connotation attached to it, right? Because by you creating something, you will naturally, if you do it right and you're good enough at it, you'll naturally get some trickle down from that, right? People will see it and go, actually, that's really cool. I can see that working for me, right? A promotional video, for example, something I try to do at least once a year, sometimes twice a year, is a large Salisbury promotional video. No one hires me to do those promotional videos. I do those promotional videos off my back because I care about the city and I want to do what I can to help the city rise.
By the way, if anybody hasn't seen them, they're super cool. And yeah, it's brilliant to give something back to the community, because it's awesome to see the city in such a special light. Anyway, cut you off mid-flow there. Sorry, carry on.
No, it's all right. But, that for me is like why I do it, right? And like all the things like, showcasing a specific thing I'm really proud of, or talking about a specific topic, or, telling a specific story, or, and some of the things that I'm probably going to transition onto from a more personal perspective is going to be a more narrative-based thing, right? Like, well, that's a documentary, a short film, etc. Those elements are things which I haven't necessarily done as much of, and personally for me are things that challenge me and would quote unquote scare me to do. And the advice I give to anyone listening this far into the podcast is going to be utilize the things and always strive, whether this is a paid project or a personal project, strive for the things that you're going, I actually am terrified of this idea and I actually don't know how I'm going to get it done, and I don't know how it's going to work, I don't know how it's going to go, but you do it anyway, because what you're doing is you're currently at a certain level in your comfort zone, and you're going to push yourself outside your comfort zone, which in turn means your comfort zone's bigger, right? So you don't have to necessarily do 3 steps outside your comfort zone every time. Even if you make a tiny step, that's still pushing your comfort zone a little bit bigger. And then you can do another one, and then another one, and then another one. And then through time, your comfort zone grows and grows and grows and grows and grows. And then you really get to a point where you're like, wait, so I did all of that last year? Wow, okay, fair enough. What's this year going to hold? So for me, like a lot of people were like, of course I have a 5-year plan. Of course I have a 1-year plan. Of course I have goals. I have things I'm aiming for. But I'm also very aware that they may not go to fruition. They may have changes. COVID was a very key example, right? We went into the year going, this year's going to be the best. It's going to be amazing. We're going to have holidays. We're going to be hot. We're going to be all these events. It's, March came along. Right. Okay, maybe not then. So then, I don't know whether you did the same, but I went back to my drawing board in regards to the goals I had and went, right, okay, so what's feasible, right? Because I was like, well, let's say this lasts for the rest of the year. Turned out it did. Let's say it did, right? What's feasible for me to do this year, right? So I went, okay, let's pull that back. It turned out that I ended up hitting the goal that I had already set previously, but that was just a bonus, right? That was a great, fabulous, go me, woohoo, right? But that wasn't the point. The point was understanding where the goals are, but also I'm happy to scrap them all to start again and say, well, what's feasible, right? What's feasible? And as long as I feel, whether that's creatively or business related, there's some level of moving forward, even if it's a tiny amount, even on days where I'm like, I don't want to work today. I have to work today, but I don't want to work today, right? If every business owner says to you they don't have days, even if they love what they do and they have done it forever, etc., where they wake up and go, I don't want to do this today. The idea of looking at a camera or editing footage or whatever, or editing photos in Gemma's case, fills me with absolute hatred and I don't want to do it. If they've said to you that never happens, they're lying, because it will, or if they're not lying, it hasn't happened to them yet, and it's going to happen to them at least 4 times in the next 2 months to 5 months.
Yes.
Right? Because it's one of those things, and that's why being kind to yourself, I've personally found, is the best way to continue moving forward, no matter what. There's some days where you work 15 hours a day, you're fired up all day, you're like, yes, I've got those done, yes. There's other days where you wake up and go, nope, right? And the thing that would normally take you 30 minutes to do takes you 4.5 hours for no reason.
Oh, I am
There's no reason at all.
On your page, and that happens to me all the time. And I have plenty of days where, I get up in the morning and I sit down at my desk full of good intentions. I've been there for 8 hours. I've done absolutely bugger all, and it very quickly just scales downward onto a Jaffa cakes and sofa kind of day. And those days happen, and it's okay. Don't beat yourself up about it, because especially as a creative, you have days when you are super creative, and guess what? That's really exhausting, and you actually really need to give yourself time just to rest and recharge. If you are in an amazingly fortunate position to be photographing multiple times every day non-stop, guess what? That's amazing for your business, but creatively, that's pants for you, and you will be utterly knackered. I can say that because the project last year was exactly that. I was photographing 4 times a day. I was knackered, and I needed those Jaffa cakes and sofa kind of days just to reboot and just go, oh, okay, right. I feel ready to face another day.
The same is true. Sorry to cut you off, but the same is true. When it comes to like doing a shoot back to back, where there's a lot of talking to camera and you're directing and this and that. Like I had a project would be a month ago now, and we were shooting a large amount of videos in a short period of time. Yes, we can do them. My God, is it tiring, right? Like, for example, a couple of years ago, I had the same thing. I was up to London twice in a weekend for two separate projects, right? So on the Saturday, I went up to do one project, cool, done, back home, sleep, wake up next day, back up to London. I got home at the end of the Sunday, and I was like, I'm a zombie. Hello, nice to meet you. I won't be saying anything of value or anything of in any way requiring energy for the next month because I'm exhausted. And it's normal, right? The thing that people misunderstand in regards to creative is your mind is working so much harder than your physical body is doing, right? Because we as creatives, we don't see, and again, I don't want to talk for you, but I personally don't see a problem as a problem. It's a problem opportunity, right? Or you can solve any problem on a shoot, and there will be. If anyone tells you, oh, there's never going to be a problem on a shoot, then they haven't been on enough shoots. I promise you right now, at least one thing will go wrong on every production, right? Or every set, or every shoot, or every photo shoot. There will be a point where it rains when it wasn't meant to. The actor that was meant to show up didn't show up. The prop which you were expecting to have by that point has been delayed because the mail's running late, or whatever it may be. Your camera lens fogs up at the worst time. Your camera decides it doesn't want to turn on, even though it's got a brand new battery and a brand new memory card in it that you checked.
Or you drop your camera in a river, which I did that once. That was not good. Not a good shoot.
No. I won't go into water damaging cameras because we'll be here for a while. But yeah. So the moral of that story is there's always going to be something that goes wrong. Right? There will always be something, and part of, again, going back to the, what we talked about earlier, you're being hired because you have the skill set to fix the problem. You need to trust yourself that you do have the skill set to fix that problem. You might not think that you do, But when it comes to the problem arising in front of you, you need to stay calm, and then you will resolve a way to fix it. And and if you don't, and you can't think of a way to fix it, then explain that to the client, right? And then find a solution. It comes with experience, it comes with time, it comes with energy, it comes with doing it a lot. So, if you're going to take anything from this podcast, it's fine to not know everything. It's fine to make mistakes. It's fine for things to go wrong, because even people who've been in the industry over a decade still happens to. They've been in the industry 2 decades, 3 decades, 4 decades, potentially. They still have things go wrong, and they still have to fix it. It's about, can you fix the problem?
Yeah, don't fear the problem before it gets there, because that's just destructive. But on the whole, people tend to work much better under pressure. They can, think on their feet. And, if a problem suddenly crops up, guess what? You're going to come up with a solution that you probably wouldn't have thought of if you knew that problem was coming. So yeah, don't fear it. You will find a way around it. And if you can't, then you'll find something else to do. It's all good. Don't be scared of it. Feel the fear and do it anyway. Isn't that what they say?
Yeah. And it goes back to that comfort zone thing. If you're like, this is a calculated risk, I trust myself to be able to fix it, but I'm going to do it anyway. This is scary. Like, for example, some people say to me, coming on a podcast is scary. Okay, do it anyway. You might enjoy it.
And the best growth comes from just outside your comfort zone. Yeah, and like you said before, that as soon as you step outside your comfort zone and do it, you're expanding your comfort zone a little bit wider, and so it's just an opportunity to keep on growing. But you can't do that without a little bit of fear. Fear is a good thing. Don't stay small and stay quiet just because it's safe, because guess what? You won't grow.
And also, to be honest, the ability to be able to grow a company and to be able to continue to be in business in this current climate, you have to be worried and scared and fearful a little bit, because it keeps you on edge. It keeps you pushing forward. It doesn't let you get comfortable. And there's a lot of conversation at the moment about people getting comfortable and things being comfortable, and you shouldn't ever. Like, for me, it's worrying when people say they're comfortable, because I'm like, okay.
Comfortable is not a good place to be. You may think it is, but it really isn't. Yeah.
No, absolutely not. So for those people who may be interested in, seeing the book perhaps, or seeing, some more of your work or what you've been working on, where can people find you? Or maybe people who want to hire you as we move out of lockdown. Hopefully that will happen at some point. It has to happen at some point, right? It has to at some point, right? It has to. Where can people find you, and where is best to reach out if they were interested?
Okay, so my website, which is gemmabrunton.co.uk. That's Gemma with a G. And also on Instagram, Gemma Brunton Photography, and same for Facebook. Where else can you find me? I'm on LinkedIn. Just Google Gemma Brunton. I don't think there's many of us.
Well, you either find if you look at the word Brunton, you either find me or Gemma. So
we're not related, by the way, in case anybody was wondering.
No, we're not. That was really funny because when we first initially spoke, it was like, you do know we have the same name, and we have literally never come across each other before now. It's very exciting.
Yeah, but no, I don't even think we have any sort of very distant relationships. And Brunton's not that common surname either. I don't. So it's quite sure that we end up in the same city.
Very small world. But absolutely, thank you so much for your time, Gemma, and I hope you enjoyed what this was.
Thank you very much. I do like a good ramble, so I've had an ace time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for joining me, ladies and gents. I hope you did take some value from hearing from my and Gemma's conversation. I've personally really enjoyed it, and I think it was good. And I really do enjoy hearing others' perspectives when it comes to their business, how they're running their business, and why and what they do specifically. So I hope you're good. I hope you're having a wonderful week. I'll see you very, very soon for some brand new content. And we have some more exciting guests coming on in the next couple of weeks as well. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you very, very soon.